Good morning, everybody in the good morning, everybody in the building. We live? Are we live? Yes, we are live and ready to go. On behalf of the leadership team of Common Good Church, I just want to thank you all for being here and for making this experience, this moment worthwhile. You know, with all this going on in the world, just like internationally, with Ukraine, nationally, with ongoing oppression and wars here at home, like we don't take it for granted that you decide to show up and be a part of connecting with other people. And even if you are not in the building and you're streaming live, you are still part of this moment. You're a part of making history. You're a part of just validating the work that we're trying to do right here at home, in the community, in the local Seattle area, and abroad. So welcome to our Black History edition of Love Your Neighbor Sunday. My name is Liana. I'm one of the pastors of Common Good Church. If you don't know what Love Your Neighbor Sunday is, that's fine. I want to give you a little bit of context if you're not a member of our church in our church community. So we believe that the call to love your neighbor extends far beyond simply telling people about God's love, but showing God's love in real, intangible ways with no strings attached. So we do something differently on Fourth Sundays from what, at least from what I grew up doing. I grew up going to church every single Sunday. When I came to Seattle and joined the staff of Common Good Church, one of the reasons that brought me here in the first place that I was really excited about was this notion of Love Your Neighbor Sunday. It was about something special that we actually do on Fourth Sundays. And instead of going to church, we are intentional about going out into our communities and our respective neighborhoods to be the church by loving our neighbor and working together for the common good. And especially around the pandemic, we initiated also what's called community conversations because it becomes very difficult at times to physically go out. You know, things are changing, but wanted to still make a way to remain connected with the community, even if we couldn't do as many physical service, have as many physical service opportunities. So established what's called, community partner conversations. So if you go on our YouTube channel, which those of you who are streaming in, you're already there, you will see some of those conversations that take place with different leaders in the community around the work that they're doing, and then the conversation around how we can connect with that work and help extend that work and just learn and grow as a community as well. So today is kind of a hybrid situation in that it is February, which is Black History Month. We wanted to do something special around Love Your Neighbor Sunday. And so it's technically our first live/virtual community partner conversation of sorts. We have gathered amazing artists and leaders, they're all leaders, and artists and people of influence and impact here in the Seattle area, Black people of influence and impact here in the Seattle area for a time of really just thought-provoking conversation. The theme and the essence of today is specifically around Black impact. And so though it is Black History Month, what Black people are doing in the world is not just what has been done. Come on, somebody, I'm not trying to preach this morning. It's not just what has been done, but it's what we are actively and currently doing in the community right now. And so we want to hear from some of the leaders in our Seattle community about what that looks like, the work they've been doing, the work they're doing, and ultimately how we as Common Good Church, but then just the church as a whole, can connect with some of those initiatives and help advance the voice of Black people and the quality of life of Black people here in our neighborhood. I would like to read a quote really quickly. It's by Dante Stewart. It says, "Black History Month is not simply asking, how can I remember and learn about Black people? It is all of us asking, how can we love Black people by seeing them, hearing them, and creating a world where Black people feel loved, inspired, and protected?" So the goal of today's event is we're having an intimate panel discussion with Black artists and community leaders around the theme, I said this, of Black impact. The hope is that through conversation, we can continue to learn and educate ourselves on what is happening in our communities and how we as a church can truly love our Black siblings and partner together to create meaningful change. So without further ado, if you looked online, you were able to already witness the timeline of events for today. But we're going to start out with a dope exercise. I don't want to ruin it. I want to just introduce Nye and allow Nye to walk us through it. But I just want to tell you a little bit Na Akua is a New York-born poet, actor, educator, and sound word practitioner who is Ghanaian and Bayesian and queer. Akua uses the vibratory energy of sound and the intent of word as a vehicle towards healing. When Akua is not writing and performing, they are facilitating sound healing sessions which focus on breathing, being in the body, and multisensory meditation. I invite Nad to help us enter this space this morning as we move into our panel discussion.
All right. I like to always start off with peace, family. So when I say peace, family, just say peace, family. Peace, family.
Peace, family.
Okay, awesome. So what we're going to do today is we're going to just take a moment to take 3 deep breaths in and out. I like to do these things. I like to start off with the breathing exercise before I go into like what our little exercise, our extra exercise is going to be, just because, you know, when we wake up in the morning, the first thing that we recognize is that we still have breath. So we want to acknowledge that breath that we have right now and really be intentional in that breathing exercise. So if you want to take this moment, and my folks that are streaming, take this moment right now to close your eyes if you feel comfortable, and really just settle inside yourself for this moment. And as you settle inside yourself for this moment, take that deep breath in, and then take that deep breath out. One more time, take that deep breath in. Take that deep breath out. Last one, take that deep breath in. And then take that deep breath out. The exercise that I want to do with you today is creating the ah sound. So my folks that are streaming, you can do this, very casually, in your home or wherever you're at. And my folks here, you have your mask on, so you can still create this ah sound and we can still be COVID safe. So, why I ask you to create this ah sound, what I've researched and what I've understood is that we do the ah sound unintentionally and unconsciously in our everyday living. We create the ah sound when we sigh. We create the ah sound when we laugh. We create the ah sound when we cry. We create the ah sound in so many different ways. And the ah sound is to really create this release, whether this release is of happiness or of sadness. There is some form of way of creating a space to separate the tension or the laughter or joy inside of our bodies. So I want us to consciously do this work and intentionally do this right now to create that ah sound. So if there is something that you need to release, whatever it might be on this Sunday morning, you can release it at this moment. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to create this ah sound. We're going to do it 3 times. Now, don't worry. This is not about vocals. We're not trying to be like Beyonce. We're not trying to do any of that right now. We are just letting our bodies release a sound. And however that sound comes out, allow it to come out. Don't force it. This voice is precious, okay? So, on the count of 3, we're going to create the ah sound. We're going to do it 2 more times after that, and then we'll be done. All right? Y'all with me? Yeah. Cool. All right. 1, 2, 3. Take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Let that settle inside your body as we go into our second ah. 1, 2, 3. All right. Take another deep breath in. Take a deep breath out. And for this ah sound, I want you to really think about that one thing that you want to release today. That one thing that was carrying itself with you during the week, found itself with you during this weekend, and we're about to hop into Monday tomorrow, and you don't want it with you. You don't need it to start your next week. You need to let that go. So in this let that go, whatever that might be. 1, 2, 3. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you,
I'll let that be in my name.
Thank you, for, can you hear me? For creating a space and just centering us. Definitely release some anxiety, some fear. Have a tendency to go into my week already thinking about all the things I gotta, tackle. And so just intentionally trying to just practice being present, the present of being present. And so while we're here in this moment and just recentering my thoughts, I've come to a revelation, like, if I'm living in a moment other than right now, I'm stealing the joy of this moment. I'm not, what's the point of being here if I'm not here? So you really help to create that. So, wow, we have some dope panelists. And I want to spend all the time with them talking about who they are and just about their thoughts and picking their brains. Before we jump into the questions for this morning, I want to briefly, if you go on our website, there's the bio is a little bit more in depth. And you can just, follow them on their websites and social media. But I want to briefly introduce you to who we have on the panel today. They'll also talk more about who they are and what they do. And then if time permits, depending on the time, we may open the floor for some community questions. Cool? Callers, cool? Okay. So we have our very own Simon. For those of you who are part of the Common Good family, Simon Okela. He is the founder and executive director of One Vibe Africa. Simon started One Vibe to establish music and arts center in Kasuma. Did I pronounce that right?
You did good.
Come on. As a platform to encourage its citizens to participate in critical engagement of culture, art, music, technology, and education, to inspire youth to realize their full potential and avoid drugs and violence and create a sustainable future. So welcome, Simon. We will definitely be picking your brain today. We have Jonathan Cunningham. I really had to cut his bio short. So if you want to know more, you got to go on the website. Jonathan is a senior program officer at Seattle Foundation. His work drives investment in historically underserved communities through funder collaboratives and innovative grant-making initiatives that aim to increase racial and economic equity in the region. He's also the principal architect of Repair, which we'll talk more about later, so I'll move on. Jonathan has a wealth of professional experience in developing, implementing, and managing community initiatives for the last 15 years. He's a former Seattle Arts Commissioner with deep knowledge of navigating public, private, and municipal partnerships. Jonathan is also an award-winning music journalist and editor. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you.
We have Alicia, who we wouldn't even be in this space right now if it wasn't for her, and I'll let her tell you more about that. But she's an artist, curator, and organizer based in Seattle and one of the co-founders of Wabanari, which is where we are. Alicia is currently a member of the Americans for the Arts Emerging Leaders Network Advisory Council and has won 4 Americans for the Arts Public Art Year in Review Awards for her work. So it's a breathful right there. So we're gonna just, can we clap it up for the panel? Especially we want to acknowledge Simon. Simon is the reason they are all here because of his relationship with them. This is not, he's a member of Common Good, but you leverage your relationships and realize one of the greatest resources we will ever have is human resources. And so we're grateful for you, Simon, and for reaching out to these wonderful people that you know to make this moment possible. So we want to just dig straight in because I want to use all the time with you talking and not me. So the first question that I want to ask, well, actually, I want to start with you, Alicia, because I want you to kind of give a frame of reference of where we are, what this space is, why it matters, this community, all of that, and then we'll go into more questions.
We were talking about before the panel, like figuring out how long people have lived here. We were like, it'll come up in the conversation. So I'm a born and raised Seattleite. This home is the second home that Frank and Goldine Green bought. The first home was right next door. At one point, they owned 6 houses in Seattle Central District, and over time, they had to sell those homes due to economic pressures and the pressures of like gentrification, displacement, a lot of words that we've been hearing over the last 10 years. Seattle's been really dealing with intense gentrification. Our black population has gone from 12% to 6% in the time that I've lived here. And this neighborhood went from 80% black down to 8% black. So we, 4 of us, Inye Wakoma, Jill Friedberg, and Rachel Kessler, and myself, decided to rent this home back in April 5th, 2019. It's almost our birthday. To really think about how can artists use our financial resources to be able to make a different way around solving displacement. So we paid the rent here. And people donated money to pay the rent here, and that's what they continue to do. And it's a way to kind of financially do that, but we also create a space for community. So you can come here Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, see incredible art from all over the world. Right now we have, in the downstairs area, which you might see, work by Nick Nonso, who is from Nigeria. We have artists that just graduated from art school. So really thinking about how the ideas of our black artists kind of infiltrate the world and help us think, create a better world. And then you can come here to have community events, all of that. So we really believe that community changes politics, situations, policy, and that's the work we're doing here.
That's beautiful. Can you talk a little bit just more about the general area? Like, I hear that Black life in the Central District is starting to emerge again. Can you talk a little bit about that? And
yeah, I really want to publicly thank Joaquin Garrett. He's been fighting the fight with a lot of other people for a long time. He is the CEO of Africatown. So they they collaborated with another organization. What is it? It's not.
Which one? There's two
not
properties. Okay, it was Capitol Hill Housing. Now it's, I can't
Community
think of the name.
Roots.
Community Roots.
Okay.
Community Roots Housing.
We did it together.
Community Roots Housing.
So they partnered with Community Roots to create the Liberty Bank building, which I think believes have like 80% black occupancy, and then they ground broke just 1 block away from here on what will be the Africatown Plaza. There's also a resurgence of black businesses all over this neighborhood. You can eat from, black soul food to Ethiopian food, which is incredible. So I've been kind of saying a lot that we're a part of, this is no longer a redlined community that only black and Jewish and Japanese folks can really live in. It's going to be a multicultural community that's thriving and really interesting. So I'm excited to see what this neighborhood looks like in 10 to 15 years.
one last question. If it was 80% black people and now 8% black people, where did they go?
I don't know where they went. I was giving an interview the other day. So Inye Wakoma, our partner here, this is his family's home. And he gave this really interesting analogy. There's like a sci-fi show, which of course I can't think of, like the lost ones or the stolen ones. But basically the premise of this show is that people wake up one day and half the population is gone. So it could be half your family. Some families were left intact. And I thought it was such a great analogy for what's happened, right? Because I have friends who moved away for college and didn't come back. I know people who lived in the Central District and moved to Renton, maybe Everett. But I can't tell you exactly where they went, you know what I mean? Because it's like, it's not like everybody just went one place.
Right.
And then some people are here, so that's why I like that analogy. Like maybe there's 2 people still living in a family in the Central District, but other family members moved out. So I think people just kind of got scattered in this way, which is why it's so important for the space, because they was able to have a community together, they were able to organize together, and when you scatter people in this way, it kind of breaks all those bonds.
The sense of identity
Yeah.
is a little disturbed. Thank you for sharing. So I was, before we started talking, there was some side chatter around this idea leadership and what it means to be a leader. I won't go in depth, but I think a lot of times we can undervalue the role that we play or the significance of our part when they're like particular people or modes of being that we can idolize and determine like that's what a leader looks like. And so oftentimes we can minimize our impact in our role, which made me think of right? It made me think of the work that you just did for us, and a lot of times that's not necessarily put on a platform as like this person is a leader, right? But a lot of times it's what the leader needs before the leader can even go out and be who the leader needs to be. So my question for you is talk to us about the relationship between art and healing and how its impact on Black people and Black leaders specifically.
I mean, when I first think about, thank you for asking that question. When I first think about art, I think about expression. I think about ways to really, I mean, kind of what we started out with. And what we started out with was a release. And art is a form of release. And there's so many variations of art that you can use to release, whether it be happiness, frustration, sadness, courage. All those things can be done in art. And then when you have art and you have healing, now you have a space to actually form that conduit. Like art is the conduit to healing. So when you have that connection, it automatically brings an impact. It automatically has an avenue where you can take leadership, or you can actually take maybe somebody who doesn't feel like they're a leader, maybe not the folks that's even up on this platform, but just people out, on streaming right now. There's a way that you can find art that can heal you, but also make an impact on your community, and also make an impact even if it's not a small group. And that small group can feel something, and then it becomes a domino effect. And now it becomes like, oh, I see you, I want to do this now. Or, you know what, I never thought about it like that. And it embraces this atmosphere of empathy and compassion. That's what art does. I mean, sometimes we dismiss art, sometimes we don't get money funded into art as much, but art is the language. It is the microphone. It is the microphone in all its various ways and foundations. It helps the healing, and it helps the impact in the community, in the Black community. I mean, side note, I've been watching a whole bunch of docuseries about hip hop from like the late 60s into the early 70s, but I was just like, they had to do that because they needed to find healing. And it's still here. Right. Why? Because we still need it. Right. In all its variations, good or bad, we still need some way to express ourselves so we can find a way of healing, so it can impact that little child or that other person that's just like, what do I do? Right. All right, I can express myself through there.
Yeah, right. Because honestly, not everybody always has the words, right? And sometimes it's like, you may not be able to verbalize or articulate, what you're going through, or really what's going through you that needs to get out of you, right? But art becomes an avenue to do that. Simon, you want to jump in and talk a little bit about the power of just art and expression and its, its healing impact, or just whatever thoughts you may have around that? I know I kind of put you on blast, but I know it's also part of the work that you do, right? Like, why start One Vibe Africa in the first place? What's the value behind that,
Yeah, for me, I also think about art as, a stamp that we were here, and as Black people particularly, our history, whether you look at Africa, the way that African history, most of it is in museums in Europe, even as we speak, there are heads of African kings and queens that are in museums in Europe, that African leaders are being told blatantly that you can't have the heads of your tribal kings and queens, and you can't be told why, And a lot of African countries, especially the Francophone African countries, are still paying, most of their money is still being deposited in France, So I feel that art is a very important way of us saying that this is what we saw while we were here. And so the next generation of of youth can read our books, can listen to our music, can listen to our poetry. That's why when I walked in here, and the first thing that Solmas told me was that you need to get my mother's book, you know. And her mom is an incredible leader, you know, Dr. Joy Hardiman, here in this region and also in Africa. And so, you know, while I'm speaking, I have my own book that I've written that documents the story of One Vibe, you know. So I don't need to explain to someone in Japan that this is what One Vibe did. You know, you can go to any platform and learn about it. But the story of One Vibe is not in isolation. If you read the book, you'll find Jonathan's story and his own perspective about One Vibe. So what Common Good is doing today by bringing our community together in order for us to have this conversation is also a stamp, you know. And so I feel that it's very important that we consistently bring people together so that we can create a community stamp, that this is what we did together as a community. Yeah.
I like it. I also like the idea that it's a stamp that you were here or we were here, but it also it's an inheritance, right? And then you think about like inheritance in a monetary sense. It's like one of the frustrated states of our community is the fact that like every generation has to start from scratch, and not even so much just from scratch, but with some of the debt, you know, of what you're collecting. And so it always feels like there's no momentum and there's no, like, and so when you take that and you take away the monetary sense, but we're talking about history, identity, right? It's like when a kid is born, a black kid is, they don't have to start from scratch. They don't have to create their identity from scratch. They don't have to wonder who they are. The more stamps that are left along the way, right? The more impressions, the more evidences of what you come from, your confidence is different, right? Even when you get here, you know, I think about that being powerful. And all right, we're going to transition real quick, but I want to ask this other question, and you guys weren't prepared for it, so if you want to take a minute to just answer it, that's fine. But I also think about the nature of healing and how, you know, it's changing as far as our receptivity to like to formalize therapy and things of that sort, right? But talk about the therapeutic nature of art or the ways of expression, or even the activity we just did, and how those types of activities are utilized in the black community when we didn't have access, you know, to other types of therapies. We didn't have financial resources. We didn't have, how did black people heal themselves so that we didn't go crazy and we can keep going? Tell me a little bit about that. Think on it. Think on it, think on it.
Well, I'll speak to the church. This is a little controversial.
Okay.
In Africa particularly, the church contributed to the African healing practices, the night runners, the witch doctors, the juju people. The church declared all African spiritual practices, you know, dark, backward,
Demonic.
terrible, illegal. So people are murdered for doing the things you're talking about. But it's resurging now, you know. It's resurging because of the stamps that have been left. The gardens, like behind Wanawari, there's a community garden. The plants that children are learning their benefits, you know, is now allowing people to also heal naturally, because even Western medicine is being challenged, you know. The church is also now being challenged to function within communities and to accommodate some of these practices that we are talking about in the African or African American communities, you know. So I feel that, you know, institutions will have to adjust and work collaboratively in order to accommodate some of these African practices.
Yeah, you know, I have thoughts on it. You know, it's interesting that this conversation is being facilitated by a church, because I think the answer to the question, particularly a couple of generations ago, on where did black people go in the absence of therapy or counseling or what have you, was to go to church. And particularly the black church was very healing and therapeutic for many generations. And even before even going in a physical structure, folks would just make a joyful noise out in the fields and anywhere that they are, you know, and whether it's putting on some gospel. Like sometimes if you're going to church, my favorite part of church is praise and worship. Doesn't necessarily mean that I don't enjoy what the pastor's sharing. Pastor can be incredible, but there's something about that music, and when you come in and that gospel band is hitting, it hits differently. It just hits right, and man, you can also release. You can actually do the exercise that Nah just led us through, during praise and worship
Yes.
section, right then and there, something that if you physically walked into a church carrying something, you can let it go. You can let it go, and trust that your higher power is going to take care of it. And so I think that was the main space for that release.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan, while you talking, how about you go on and answer the next question for us? What does a Black impact mean to you? Like when you even heard that statement, like we're talking about Black impact, what does that mean? How do you internalize that? How do you process that concept?
You know, I'm not sure. I mean, when I think about it, being able to make an impact in the community is incredibly important. And if you're able to make an impact, I think being able to make an impact in your community, however you define your community, whether that's the Black community, if that's the LGBTQ community, if that's the literary community, if that's the arts community, being able to make a powerful impact. If that's the Asian Pacific Islander community, like being able to make a positive impact is incredibly important. I think in this context, because Black folks are such a smaller part of the overall demographic to where we are, it's sometimes there's ways where there's more of a focus on what Black impact looks like. I don't think that there's as much focus on what white impact looks like or what other, but I think we're a smaller part of the population. But I think it ultimately just comes down to doing what you can do, to leave your mark, to leave your stamp and make this place, leave the world a better place than how you found it. And there's lots of ways to do that, whether it's through a beautiful place like Wanawari, whether that's just being an upright citizen and for me, it's being a father and a husband. Those are the ways in which I can make an impact. Those are probably the most important ways that I can make an impact is by being a father and a husband, and to be able to walk good. And then by doing those things, and those things matter most, right? Because I think we also have to get away from focusing so much on a leader's external view and how they're viewed, right? But if somebody talks good but doesn't walk good, that's a problem. And sometimes we're so focused on how somebody talks, but we pay less attention to how somebody walks. So where I put most of my focus on how I can bring straightforward and honest impact is at home, right? And from there, it trickles out.
Yeah, I grew up here. My pastor say, like, home is your first ministry. Home is the first place. A lot of pastors, I don't know why I laugh, 'cause it's not good, but a lot of pastors' kids hate them. Like you don't want to be out in the world and everybody else loves and affirms you, and then at home, they barely know you or you barely know them. But okay, but tell us a little bit. But there is a lot of work that you do outside of home, even though home is the first ministry. So tell us about Repair.
So Repair is racially equitable philanthropy aimed at initiating reparations. And it is a 5-year, $25 million commitment to the Black community of the greater Seattle region. And that's facilitated through my work. I currently work at Seattle Foundation as a senior program officer. And so one of the things that I've had the honor to help co-design is this program called Repair. And really it's meant to look at the chronic underinvestment in Black-led nonprofits and organizations that have come from the philanthropic sector. Not just ours, but including ours. But it's really the sector as a whole. It's not to point fingers at any one entity. The philanthropic sector as a whole has underinvested in the Black nonprofit ecosystem for a long time. And then you have amazing spaces like this, which obviously are, while this might be seen as not to scale as maybe Africatown Community Land Trust, but this place is vital, right? And so, and this place also can't operate without funding and support. And so it's about how are we as a foundation, through work, ensuring that we're moving more resources towards Black-led and serving organizations. And that distinction is important. You can't just have a Black executive director, but have an all-white team and all-white board. And then for us to be called a Black-led organization, really it's got to be based off of, the executive leadership team and all the things. But aside from that, it really is for us, it's just about moving more resources to Black-led organizations. That's through sponsorships. That's through, where we're sponsoring more community events. That's through our vendors, who are we contracting with, who are we utilizing services for communications and food and all the things. And of course, our grant-making budget and donor advice funds, things of that nature. So the goal is to get $25 million out. The easy math is when you have a 5-year, $25 million commitment, that you need to be able to move at least $5 million a year to the Black community over the course of 5 years. And so I'll give a quick preview that we did some preliminary tracking, and just in year 1 alone, we moved over 12 million to the Black community just since Repair launched. So that's huge, and it's also guided by the Spirit. I'm in the driver's seat and get to initiate some of these things, but I'm doing so co-designing it with community members, with our Black-led organizations cohort, constantly testing things, talking to other leaders in the community. But this is work. It's no small feat to get a 75-year-old white dominant foundation to say yes to anything with reparations in the name.
I was about to say, reparations is a cuss word.
It's huge. And how are we talking about redistributing wealth to the Black community? So that's huge. And the only way this, if I'm being honest, with both feet on the floor, the only way something of that magnitude happens is is through the creator's working through me.
Yeah.
Right? So I sometimes struggle with the praise because I know that this is God's work is being done.
Yeah.
That's just the
Still have to
reality.
say yes.
Yes.
Let me ask you this really quickly. Let's like just assume nobody knows what the word reparation means. And even like it's like the context of that in relationship to Black people.
Sure.
Like give a simplified definition of the value and even like some of the origin of that term.
Sure. When harm is caused, harm needs to be repaired. That's it. When harm is caused, when harm is caused, it needs to be repaired. If two people are driving, and if I crash into your car, I've got to, either me or my insurance company have got to pay to repair that. I have caused harm, and it's got to be repaired. I mean, it doesn't have to be such a complicated concept. I think we can, I'll just be honest. Like I'm watching what's happening overseas in Ukraine right now, and I'm incredibly empathetic, as much as I can be, because what's happening is horrible. And I'm also finding our U.S. government coming up with reparations money in the span of a week. You know what I mean? We're just authorizing $6 billion over here and $350 million over here, and they just in one conversation, I just authorized another $350 million. But they can't discover the same. I think we can acknowledge what's happening in Ukraine is horrible. I think we can all acknowledge that the slavery happening in the United States was horrible, and the United States government bears responsibility. We can find a reparations a dollar amount worth of payment in a week for Ukraine. But 200 years later, we still can't seem to find not $1 to support Black folks. So that's the type. As these things continue to happen, it's hard to watch. I'll be honest. Like I'm just sitting here and I'm just like, oh, good, yes, support the folks in Ukraine. What's happening? It's horrible. My goodness. But then I'm just like, interesting approach. You know what I mean? Like, or I mean, it's the narrative. Like if you're even just sitting there on TV, like the narrative is like the Ukrainians are standing up. They're fighting for their country. And I'm like, yeah, that makes that, and it's being called heroic, and it is. And then you also will see whenever folks on the African continent or what have you, or freedom fighters are standing up for their territory, or the Middle East, what have you, they're always immediately like when the folks are brown skinned, black skinned, they're immediately labeled as terrorists for fighting for their own country. The Ukrainians are fighting for their own country while it's being invaded, and they're being called heroic. And so these types of things keep happening where you're just like, it's just frustrating. It's frustrating.
Okay, so let me ask this question to everyone. So when when the weight of so much that is going on feels like it's endless, and it feels so big and it feels so huge, how do you zoom back into your life and say, how do you know when you're able to say, yes, I make an impact? Like when do you feel like the work that you're doing actually matters? Like what's the litmus for that?
When a youth says thank you. I mean, I work in so many different demographics when it comes to adults and youth. So when a youth can actually say, I did this workshop with Na, and it was, it really helped me, or just like, or maybe not it coming from the youth specifically, like initially, or it might be something that somebody said, like, even an adult. I do classes, I do meditation and writing classes, and then sometimes I'll see the surveys because I have to do that. I have to give out surveys. But when I see what the answers or the responses back, I'm just like, oh, I didn't even know that I did that, because I'm led. It is something that I feel in my life that if you asked me 10 years ago, would I be doing this? I would have probably said no, because I would have tried to get a 9 to 5 but I'm led by the creator, by this energy, by this higher power to really push this initiative. And when I'm pushing this initiative, people know I'm genuine. And when you're authentic and you're genuine in the work that you do, you already know that you're making an impact. Even if there's only one person, sometimes I'm like, I'm here today, but usually I do a meditation, a 1 hour drop-in meditation on Zoom. And sometimes I only get one person. But you know what they say? Thank you. So I'm like, all right, whatever happens, happens. Just because there's one person that at least I know got grounded. So that's it.
Yeah. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to know you can make a difference, spend the night with one mosquito in a room together. The way the mosquito will make you sleepless is how you can make the problem or the challenge you're facing sleepless.
That's beautiful.
Yes.
Follow him on Instagram. He's got more of those.
That's true.
Very true.
We got a moderator panel. But that's real. One mosquito.
Yes.
It's constant. It's consistent. I'm not gonna answer my own question. Somebody else. How do you know if you, or how do you, where do you get your sense of like, I made an impact? Or do you struggle with it?
I struggle with it. In my current work, I think I'm making, I don't struggle with it as much at home. I just have to consistently be that person that needs to be. But in work, I mean, what does it mean to distribute $25 million to Black-led organizations? What needs to change, right? So that's some of the metrics that we're working on determining right now, but also doing so in an anti-racist way, right? Because I think for me, at least, 3 artists on the panel, and then myself really working in the philanthropic space, like I think I find myself wanting to ensure that if this is the medium in which I'm able to do God's work, that I'm able to do so in a way, especially if we're talking about releasing funding for more BIPOC-led and Black-led organizations, then doing so in an anti-racist way. And so even the evaluation has to be different. The way in which we're looking at metrics, the quantitative and qualitative data has to be different. But I'll share one of the things that keeps me up at night is what does it mean to celebrate the release of repair and all the things if $25 million doesn't change anything, and then it's just like what was accomplished. And so that's the stuff that when you said what are the challenges of measuring impact, that's a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I think the work that similarly I work in is hard to know. For a minute, we were like trying to get this property that was Black owned, working out, trying to figure it out, and it just slipped through our fingers, and it just felt so frustrating because we're trying to kind of grow and save space for Black people, and it just feels like the market pressures are just so out of control, you can't even fight. And and I know a lot of people like myself who grew up here, we can't figure out how to buy a property. And it's just like, that's not necessarily around impact, but it's just more like,
Impact.
right? How do you figure this out when it's a behemoth and you're one person? But I do think I could use a personal experience, but I'm not going to do that because it'll make me cry. So I'm going to talk about Betty White instead. But somebody who's 99 years old, they die, right? All the memes were going around being like, you should live your life where if you're almost 100 years old and people are sad that they thought you should live longer. And really, she was on a couple shows, but for somehow she tapped many, many people's hearts, right? Myself included. So, I think that we don't know our impact. You could just be, there's a woman, Lottie, I'm going to screw up her last name, but she started a fresh gardening program and food program around here. People do things that seem small scale at the time, and you never know, like you said, that might be the food somebody, needed. I bought some journals from this guy, and he wrote me that he was so appreciative because he didn't know how he was going to pay a bill, and that my money paid the exact amount of the bill, and I was just like, it was like, so I think there's small stuff like that we need to pay more attention to so that we, because it's little tiny, I like that mosquito analogy. It's little types of ripples of impact. Yeah.
I like the way you said it. We don't know our impact, right? The assumption, I led the question with the assumption that a person could be able to know their impact. You only know to a degree the impact you're exposed to, i.e., that man could have paid his bill and never told you, right? And then you had that impact, but you didn't necessarily know. Which is, what, you about to say something?
No. I
Okay.
was with you. Yeah.
No, which
yeah.
goes back, I think, to Simon's point. Maybe I should have even phrased the question differently, because it's not even so much about the results as much as about knowing, results matter, but knowing that you were adamant about the work that you were trying to accomplish, that you didn't give up on what you were doing. Like the mosquito, you gonna wake up and your body gonna be bit up. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can say it had impact. You know, the mosquito was just trying to draw some blood. And so when you think about the work that we're doing, we do know, or you do know, that there's a problem that you see that you're trying to be a part of the solution of. You know, I'm gonna ask another question, conscious of time. I'm gonna give this story really quickly, and then I'm gonna ask another question. It made me think of, my sister owns a house in LA. I'm from LA, you guys know that, some of you know that. And she's in the process of turning her garage into an ADU, additional dwelling unit. It's like a 1-bedroom studio type situation. And my sister's name is Jonna. And I was like, Jonna, you know, we can Airbnb this space, you know? And she was like, you know, that's true, but I want to be a part of the solution. And meaning, like, this one house, this one unit she wants to make accessible to somebody to be able to afford to live in LA. And I think a lot of times in our lives, the way I started this situation, it really pricked my heart and saying, what are the garages in our lives that we get to turn into ADUs to make accessible to somebody else, that this one act, this one decision becomes a part of the solution, right? She's not changing all the economy of LA or the accessibility of living or everyone's living situation, but this one home can be a part of the solution. And so my next question is, how can Common Good or churches like Common Good, especially churches that are not predominantly black, align with some of the black initiatives and the work in the community to be a part of garages that we turned into ADUs?
I mean, I think that's an interesting point. I mean, I'm Christian, but I haven't gone to church for a while because I want to be in a place that's anti-racist, right? I feel like some places feel like they go on Sunday and they did their work and they go off and like still are complicit in white supremacy. You know, you'll go on a mission trip to Guatemala, which, you know, is complicated and stuff, but you got people right outside that need food, right? So I just think, like, I love what you said at the beginning about taking 1 day a month and being the church. So, I mean, I think, like, living those values, how do you make sure people are fed? How do you redistribute wealth? You know what I mean? Really looking at how Jesus moved through the world is really just kind of how people should be thinking, right? This country is in crisis in a huge way, and there's not a lot of compassion and love, and that is actually the ethos of what churches and people should be doing. So, you know, I don't even know if I really answered your question. I just used it as an opportunity to. But I was like, I've been following this woman on. She's got a book, but she's like the Unfit Christian. If you want to go on Instagram, but she's got some interesting points about calling out some of, you know, the hypocrisies of what we should actually be doing and how we should be living in the world. So, from a Christian context, so I just will put that out there too.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll probably contribute to that with another African proverb that
Hey,
says,
let's go.
this
Give
one
us all
says,
Proverbs.
wisdom is like fire. People take it from each other. And the church and Jesus is like wisdom, you know. The more the church gives wisdom or Jesus or create community with people, the stronger it becomes. You know, if you're a wise person in the community and you share your wisdom, you share your knowledge, you become wiser. Your community lifts you up. But for the most part, the churches are isolated. They're in nice compounds, fenced nicely, with very secluded environment. They don't go into community, you know. But if you look at the life of Jesus, Jesus was always with the fishermen in the community. He was always in the market with the traders. But our churches are isolated. So what the church, particularly Common Good, has done today is trying to emulate Jesus in practice, not in theory. Many churches live in the Bible. They don't live in the community, you know. So So that's why it's important to also remember these African proverbs because they came from our ancestors who lived before the Bible existed.
Come on.
You know. So I hope that helps.
Many churches live in the Bible. They don't live in the community. I might quote you one time.
It was a good one.
Hard.
That's real.
That's
very
good.
real.
Okay, so like, if a person's leaving here today, what is, or is streaming in live, like what is one practical takeaway? So like, I get it, like, well, also, no, pause. I have another question. Jonathan, what is think on that. Think on that, because we'll come back to that. Like, what do you say, what is a next step? What is like a practical next step, whether that's, you know, I'm not gonna say, I want you to think about like, if so, you know, I get it in theory, even challenging, you know, I even like what you said about challenging, like the way churches have been complicit, you know, in racism and oppression, absolutely. So like, if a person's like, but what do I do now? Where do I go from here? How do I support the uplifting of Black people? Where do I attach or connect with people in this area to make a difference? Where is the tangible next step?
I think cultural exchange, like dialogue, community, like this is a version of it right now. You're doing it right now, right? This church is doing it. Those who are members of the church who have come here today are doing it right now. Those who are watching online are totally understandable. But if you've actually come here today to what is, I still think of as a historic Black community in Seattle, into this Black-owned establishment to learn a little bit more, like you're doing it. And that also has to go both ways, right? And so I'm big believer in intersectionality and solidarity between specifically between oppressed groups, and really want to see more Black folks responding to anti-Asian violence and Asian people responding to anti-Black racism. And when these things are happening in tandem, like trust is earned, right? So you can't just tell me that you will show up for me. You actually have to show up for me, and vice versa. And so there's a lot of anti-Black racism that's happened sometimes, often, and where there can be solidarity amongst those who are not of that demographic, who are able to call that out or address that or do something about it, that shows that you're willing to show up, right? But it also has to go both ways, right? We saw in 19 and 20 and 2021 spikes in violence against the Asian American Pacific Islander community. And one of the things that broke my heart was that sometimes the perpetrators would be Black. And it's a complicated thing. And it's complicated because a lot of the anti-Black racism that Black folks sometimes experience can happen from Asian Americans. And so how are we addressing that? Like, how are we getting to know one another? And I think setting some of that aside, really it's just about breaking bread and just being in space together and getting to know one another, because there's so much shared identity and there's a lot of shared struggle. And there's a lot of similarities. Like I hear old Asian elders and old Black elders, and there's like a lot of similarities. Talk a lot of smack, talk about you right to your face, all the things. But a lot of wisdom, right? And there's just a lot of commonality there. But I think one of the things that structural racism does is that it divides people who otherwise would be together, and it pits people against one another. It's almost as if, you know, a school opens up and there's space for, and Black students join the school. Does that mean that all of a sudden that the other students in the school won't have the same opportunities? Not at all, right? But you have spaces, you have times in which Black people are being bussed into situations in the schools, better schools, and sometimes the resistance isn't just from white parents, it's from other parents of color, you know? And so it's just like, what is this zero-sum mentality? Like, there's enough for all. We have to get away from this zero-sum mentality. Like, my success doesn't come at your cost, and vice versa. If you're doing well, I'm happy for you. If I'm doing well, be happy for me. But it's like we're being forced to compete, and that's not what Christ would want.
Right.
When you preached last week, because I watched the sermon, you preached the word, right? And I think that it's all about like, what are we doing, right? You have to walk it as well. You can't just talk it, you have to walk it, right? And so I think these are spaces in which it's being walked out. And I think that's an important next step.
Yeah, and I think just like I had to understand, I've been doing like equity trainings, going to equity trainings since I was in high school, right? Like nobody knows this stuff inherently. We actually all have these kind of racist principles because we live in America or Western world, right? Or the whole world. So we have to constantly be kind of decoding ourselves. So like reading books, like how to be an anti-racist. So you want to talk about race, getting together and doing caucuses. Like, you know, I have had to really work on, you know, intersectionality, but my own kind of privilege of somebody who grew up middle class and realizing that I had access to stuff that other people didn't have access to. I'm constantly decoding. So I just think that's the work that people have to join into and do, which is part of it. And it's hard work, it's lifetime work, but you got to start doing it.
Yeah. I like the way you said about the educating ourselves, right? Or being proactive about it. If there's anything else we wanted to know about, we go to school, we spend money, we put degrees into all these different fields, and it seems when it comes to this topic or topics around racism or being anti-racist, I'll hear people and it's like, I don't know what to do, and I'm like, did you try? Did you go read a book? Did you watch a film? Did you get some education? Like all these things are actually free right now. People that have like poured in their life's work into, elevating certain conversations, and then myself included, like you said, and so like I appreciate you highlighting that, and you and Jonathan both touched on this idea of like the intentionality behind trying to be anti-racist, right? Like you don't just have to be white to even have a racist paradigm, right? Like even us as black people can be indoctrinated by certain beliefs and thoughts even about ourselves, and then infiltrate that, and so like the work of like, while a lot of Christians consider like they're deconstructing their faith, like this is even part of that work. What do I believe? How much of my faith has been married, with whiteness and certain ideas, and influence what I believe about myself, influence how I believe God operates, right? Like you're saying, like even in Africa, how we can, and even here, right, make certain things dark and demonize things we don't understand or are not a part of our own realities. And so I totally agree with you. So anybody else want to share? We're going to wrap up a little bit because I want to be respecting of the time. But if there are like any final thoughts, any other conclusions around like what we can like more proactively do, any favorite books, films, podcasts, songs, things that you're like, I read this and it changed my life. I didn't ask you this in advance. So, but if there's any thoughts or like some resources that, you can kind of just drop out there and people can Google for themselves.
I'm looking at all you guys.
Well, I would say go to the website, learn more about this space. We'll add more, content to our website, but even learning more about this very space that we're in and not taking that for granted. Simon, you said you had a book. I didn't know you had a book.
Yeah.
I would love to purchase.
I hope you.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your book and how we can get our hands on it.
Well, this book is called Rooted in Love, and this book has pictures about Seattle, pictures about Kenya. And there's an essay which is a fictional story in the book about a girl that benefited from the work of One Vibe Africa, the organization I founded. There are also stories from the village, stories from leaders like Jonathan who have seen One Vibe grow and what the work One Vibe has been doing. Some of the people featured on the book are like Rocky Dauni, who is actually the son of one of the the oldest Ghanaian chiefs, but he's also a Grammy Award-winning artist, and he has performed at Madaraka Festival. So it's a story also that has something to do with Wanawari. Yirim Sek, who is, one of the grandsons of, the original owners of this house that we're sitting in, went to Kenya with me, and his story is also in this book, and so this story for me, it's about the village, just bringing different, stories of people who have been involved in helping me grow One Vibe together, but to share that, like the mosquito, we can all have an impact,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I saw a book on the shelf in the back, Alicia, but what is?
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Let me tell you about all the things.
Everybody.
Yeah. We, this neighborhood has changed a lot, and so Inye had talked about, it was really inspired by Inye saying this phrase that Wanawari is great, but it's like scuba gear, right? So he was like, I come in here, I have the scuba gear on, and as a black person, I can feel safe, welcome. But he was like, it hasn't changed like how I feel around the neighborhood sometimes. I still feel like, it's changed so differently. And he was like, growing up, which, growing up, I felt the same thing down the street, but you would hear people on Saturdays mowing their lawn, playing music. There was sound. And, there were, like this happened a lot in the Bay Area. When people started white folks started moving in, they were complaining at black churches saying they were too loud, right? Because white folks want people to assimilate to them
Yes, they do.
instead of assimilating to the neighborhood they're
They
in.
moved into it, right?
Exactly. And so we came up with this idea of joy has a sound, right? And so it's different artists, musicians, people doing their own interpretation of like, what does that mean for them as black people? Yeah. And then we have hoodies. You can order those online. You know, we're trying to build what makes sense for us about the back says indigenous sovereignty and black liberation. So we've been showing artists and experiencing black and native artists, and then we hope to be kind of like build. I have some ideas. I don't want to talk about them yet, but for us, it's really important to not just think about the land in a like capitalistic way, right? We have a relationship to the land, and the people who were on this land before us were the Duwamish and many others, right? So, what does it mean to like save black homes? Also, when other people were displaced before we got here, so we're just we're beginning that conversation, but it's part of the work. Yeah.
Man. So, if you want a sweatshirt, you can buy it on the
Right.
website, and you can physically walk out of here with it today.
Yeah,
Not the
just
same
because
as the book.
we want to keep the
Yeah, the
you know,
inventory.
yeah, you know,
I
look
understand.
at it. Yeah.
I understand.
So you keep it on your phone, and I'll
Yeah.
lay it to you right now.
So you can purchase it on the website, but the sweatshirts are physically here. Is that the same with the book? You purchase it on the website, or you purchase it here?
You can purchase it on the website, and the book you can purchase here. There's people out there, so if you purchase stuff online at our website, we'll ship it to you.
I love it. Okay, so Na's gonna do a piece for us, but before you do your piece, we're gonna close out with your piece. How can we access more of your art and more of the work that you're doing?
You can go to my website, www.naaaakua.com. You can find out about classes that I'm doing, and you can also follow me on my Instagram, which is Na Accepts, that's NAA _ accepts, ACCEPTS.
We'll get that out there. Okay, and then Simon, did you tell us how we can get the book?
Amazon.
Amazon.
Amazon,
Okay.
yeah. The book is actually, it's actually already a bestseller on Amazon.
Oh, so we don't need to get it.
It's so hard. But listen. This
already
book was
got
so
mine.
hard to make. You know, it took 6 years for me to pull this together. And it's also through the work Jonathan is doing that I was able to get the funding to work on this book. You know, so it's not easy for black people to even make books. That's why we don't write, you know. So for me, I'm just encouraging others to find people in the village that can support them so that they can do this type of work.
Yeah.
But also getting it to Amazon bestseller is not easy, and it's hard to keep it there.
Yeah.
So the book is out on March 7th,
Okay.
and I would,
Oh, it's just.
it's out on
It's
March
not out
7th.
yet.
It's on pre-sale right now.
Oh, you didn't say that.
So I would love for you guys to go to Amazon
Absolutely.
and get the
book.
ebook. It's
Yeah.
just $5.99,
Uh-huh.
and you can also pre-order the actual book. I'm looking for speaking engagements. I'm doing this full time. I'm no longer doing 9 to 5 and One Vibe.
Come on.
I'm doing One Vibe and One Vibe Media full time. I'm hustling
Hey,
full time.
come on.
go.
So if you want a copy and you're here, I'll sign it there too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have a few copies for those who are here.
I love it. Oh, you brought a couple copies with you?
Couple of copies.
Come on, I want one, so you have minus
I
one
will.
of however many that you brought. You have minus one.
Thank
Okay, Jonathan, any final words you want to
Yeah,
share?
no, I'm just glad to be here. I think because I was talking about repair, for folks who are interested in learning more about repair, and it is reparations in action. And so, for folks who want to potentially give to the initiative, just go to seattlefoundation.org and /repair. And you can learn more. And we also have an amazing program called the Black-Led Joy and Wellness Fund that we're looking to do again this year, right? And the focus is on supporting smaller grassroots Black-led organizations with some general operating support for resources for rest, sabbaticals, reimbursement for wellness activities, smaller grassroots Black-led organizations. Sometimes the budget's just not there for rest, taking care of oneself, meditation, some of the things, some of that nature. So we did it for the very first time last year. Black-led Joy and Wellness Fund, and it was wildly successful. Helped co-curate it with our Black-led organizations cohort, folks who are just naming how hard Black leaders are working I think even what leads to this conversation is just recognizing that the Black community has gone through a lot. And so for folks who are leading Black-led and serving organizations, they are working double time, sometimes triple time, not having things like paid time off or time to rest and take care of themselves. And folks are on the verge of burning out or actually just burning out. Folks are just, you hit the tipping point and you just add it, right? So we have a fund that we released last year. We distributed $540,000 to 29 Black-led organizations. And we're going to do it again this year in 2022. So we'll need some more support. And so just go to seattlefoundation.org/repair and you can learn more about ways to support it.
So we're gonna do a final piece, but I wanted to say, first of all, Royce, just stick your hand out. I want to just acknowledge our leader, our visionary, our pastor. It's a big deal that you are creating spaces and that you are leading us, in the work that we're doing. And I just want to say, we didn't discuss this, but we'll probably put up some of your stuff, later on, the website and the social media stuff that you dropped today. We'll probably add it to the page on the site so that people can easily access it without memorizing all of the, organizations and stuff. But we want to thank you for that. I'm going to give some final thoughts now so that when you do your piece now, we're done. I don't know how long it's open, if people can go upstairs and view the artwork, get the rest of the coffee and the refreshments. But also, Black farmers, yes?
Yeah, if you need vegetables in the kitchen, and I think some are outside, Black farmers brought it here, Hockey Farm. So, we're doing free food. I keep plugging stuff. You can come get a free meal Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday by Black chefs. So we're supporting Black chefs and then the community. So that's one. So there might even be some in the fridge you can take home.
Y'all do more stuff than you can even plug.
Listen, I came just to view the space a week ago. I came just to view the space and left with some jerk chicken and some pizza, right? So get that, and I'm definitely leaving with some kale. So don't y'all be bashful. But without further ado, now could you close us out?
Yes. They say spoken word artists, but sometimes you can't memorize everything. So here we go. I guess I'll stand. That's that type of energy. All right. There is grit and grind. There are open hearts and wide open eyes. There are 12 a.m. thoughts and 5 a.m. alarms. There are bullhorns, policies, and organizing, and organizing, and organizing, and organizing. There is passion and relentless love. There is making people care again when many have forgotten. There is forgetting self-care, self-love, and self. There is rest, receive, recharge, repeat. There is rest, receive, recharge, repeat. There are artists and activists. There is patience in the doubt and hope. There is an intuition rising through the chaos. There are tears, distrust, and decoys. There is learning. There is learning. There are lessons to be learned. There is a process. There is a purpose. There is an ancestor whispering your name. There is an elder telling you to keep going. There is a member of the community that uses your persistence as fuel. There is say what you mean and mean what you say. There is a commitment, even when everyone isn't committed. There is time. There are tools. There is something that is bigger than you.
Ashe, cue up some music, DJ. That is all for today. We thank you for coming out and for tuning in. Mingle, get some coffee, whatever's left, some refreshments. Come talk to some of our speakers. Some of them have another engagement, so got to dash out. But we just respect you just coming back in person, And there's nothing like this. There's nothing like human interaction. Learn about the space. Go online, get you a sweatshirt, because I am. And let's just keep this type of conversation going. All right? All right.
Thank you.